Today's video is something a bit different. It's a compilation of all my Chainsaw Man videos in a sort of chronological order of where I think these analyses should go, not necessarily the order they were uploaded in. So some audio is going to sound a bit different because I've upgraded my setup, I've upgraded my tools, my equipment, so please bear with. While I work on other videos in the background, this is here to hold over. When it comes to Chainsaw Man, something has been bugging me for a long time. People's perception of Tatsuki Fujimoto's writing and the themes he wanted to convey through his story. Since I've started reading this manga, one point has come up repeatedly, an argument that perplexes me and which I intend to track down the source of and definitively refute it using the source material and other external entities. This claim is that Denji and Power's relationship is solely platonic, the old "they're siblings" statement that comes up over and over again. Honestly, I don't care what you ship, but I feel like this statement shows a misunderstanding of Tatsuki Fujimoto's writing. Power and Denji are more than simply platonic. I wouldn't call them siblings either. Their relationship is far too intricate to just be reduced to that. Now, before we get into my argument, where does this argument come from? If I were to guess, I'd say these 3 pages. First, let's look at chapter 79's front page that depicts Denji, Aki, and Power as children, similar to that of siblings. In fact, it does depict them as siblings. Now, this would be a point in favor of the platonic argument if it wasn't for one minor or rather major detail. This image is from Aki's perspective. This entire arc is mainly about Aki. This entire chapter is mainly about Aki. He is coming to terms with the death of his old family and embracing a new one. Denji and Power are siblings to him. Now on to Exhibit B, chapter 82, page 9. After Makima kills Power, she goes into detail about how she pulled an Aizen, for a lack of a better term, and basically had a hand in creating the life Denji has now, saying that she gave him an older brother in Aki and a bratty little sister in Power. Now, this would be valid, but to me at least, it doesn't make too much sense, and I'll tell you why. Makima has no idea what goes on in the Hayakawa residence. She has no idea of the scope of the relationship that these 3 share. She only has what she believes based on her plans for Denji. Makima saying this should not be taken as concrete evidence to support the claim that they are solely platonic or share a sibling bond. Fujimoto is a very subtle writer. He uses not only words but visual imagery to tell his story. Manga is a visual medium, of course, and I feel like that side of manga is grossly misunderstood in the larger scheme of the anime and manga community, but that's for another video. And as I said earlier, to support my claim, all evidence provided will be primarily using the Chainsaw Man manga and a few outside references here and there where I see fit. Let's take a look at every one of Denji's love interests in the series, one by one, comparing their first appearances and their interactions. And in my opinion, find out what Tatsuki Fujimoto was trying to communicate to us, the audience. Let's start with Makima, because I feel like her involvement would be rather short, because it's very straight to the point. After being killed and given new life, the first thing Denji sees is a woman that embraces him, a boy who is in the heat of puberty being embraced by an attractive woman. Makima is beautiful. She's supposed to come off as an angel. She gives Denji everything he wanted, the food he hadn't tasted before, a home, and even enticing him with a sexual relationship in exchange for his loyalty as a devil hunter. Her devil hunter. He was intoxicated. It was love at first sight to him. It also helped that she was the control devil and he was an impressionable teenager. Keep in mind, Denji is only 16. He's easily manipulated, as we see throughout the series. The relationship the two have is simple. Denji is lusting over Makima, this mysterious, older, attractive woman who could teach him so much. The first person besides Pochita to show him kindness. Makima is a manipulator, a groomer. She takes advantage of an impressionable young boy, all for the sake of her own agenda. Makima was never the end goal. She was never an option for Denji, no matter how you look at it. She was just a crush for our main protagonist. Someone to teach him a harsh lesson that most of us growing up learned. The only thing that Makima wanted was the Chainsaw Devil, not Denji. He was just the unlucky sucker to be the Chainsaw Devil's host. Reze is the second person on our ladder, making her debut in chapter 40 of the manga, appropriately titled Love, Flower, Chainsaw. We continue a subplot of Denji struggling with the idea of not having a heart. He thinks about Makima. The butterflies in his stomach could only mean that he has a heart. Makima is supporting to him. She comforts him, makes him feel better no matter what he finds himself worrying about. This is where we see more of that 16-year-old mind come into play. He's adamant about thinking he'd never fall for anyone else. Makima is the only one for him. As his thoughts stray, the rain begins to fall. Searching for shelter, that's where he runs into Reze. I find it interesting that the rain had peaked during Denji's daydream of Makima and shines when he meets Reze. It's almost as if Fujimoto is trying to communicate using visual storytelling. Makima is a storm. Nothing good comes out of her, much like a rainy day. It ruins your plans, it's depressing depending on who you ask, but it could also be comforting, soothing. It can calm your nerves, help you sleep. It's a great indication of how Denji feels about Makima and what Fujimoto is trying to tell us about Makima. The rain lets up only when someone else enters the fray, that being Reze. A change of pace, a new fresh outlook on life. She invites him to her workplace and Denji wastes no time in coming. This is when their relationship begins. Her constant touching on Denji sends his mind into overdrive. Like any boy his age with a lack of experience, he comes to one conclusion, the only conclusion that he could think of. She must like him. And not in a friendly way, something more romantic. And from Denji's perspective, regardless of experience or not, it's not hard to come to that conclusion. Denji calls to Makima for guidance, mentally at least. The idea of falling for someone other than her is scary to him, but he can't fight it. Denji describes his dilemma interesting. It gives us more insight into his thought process. Makima found my heart. My heart belongs to Makima. My body has other ideas. I can't help but draw parallel to some lyrics from a certain R. Kelly song.
My mind's telling me no, but my body is telling me yes, baby.
The chemistry between these two in the next few chapters is charming. It's cute. It feels good. You as the reader can't help but feel happy for Denji. Anyone who's been in a relationship or around someone they like where feelings are reciprocated knows exactly what this feeling is. Fujimoto is able to capture the idea of young love perfectly. Even reading it now warms my heart, and that's the point, because what comes later shatters this illusion and just makes all of these moments hurt in retrospect. My heart belongs to Makima, but my body won't listen. Chapter 42 begins in a school, continuing from where we left off with Denji remarking he wished he could go to school with Reze. Sharing a few moments together in a classroom then escalates to the pair going for a swim. Reze suggests that they swim naked, and while this would not have any relevance on its own, it's Denji's reaction that's telling. Fujimoto illustrates Denji's anxiety beautifully here. He's having an inner struggle, something that I personally am familiar with. The feeling of betraying your morals, going against your word, feeling like you're about to make a mistake. Don't do it, Denji. If I go, my heart will go with my body. But before we know it, the rain returns. It's foreshadowing. The dreaded rain that accompanied the daydreams of Makima. The rain that became the sun with the introduction of Reze. Reze leaves Denji alone for a while. Alone to his thoughts. He's fighting an inner battle. Who does he go for? Reze? Makima? He can't decide. He's confused. And the fact that he sees both of them when he closes his eyes doesn't help either. This is where we see the glaring flaw in Denji's character. He's naive, quick to fall in love with the first woman that treats him kindly. It's superficial, idealistic, unrealistic, and unhealthy. This is where we're handed new information about Reze. She isn't who she appears to be. Chapter 44 is where it goes all downhill. After the two spend some time together at the festival, they are once again alone. Reze begs Denji to quit his job to run away with her, but he's still indecisive. Reze is perceptive. She knows Denji likes someone else, and she puts him on the spot before stealing a kiss. Reze bites Denji's tongue clean off. You see, she was a Russian spy and a hybrid herself that was sent by the gun devil to take Denji's heart. Yet another woman in his life took advantage of his naivety, using him for personal gain. Denji comes to this realization beautifully. While I was in so much pain, I thought I'd die. In the back of my confused brain, I thought about things real hard, and I realized something. Every woman I meet tries to murder me. Everybody's after the chainsaw heart. But what about my heart? Denji's. Does nobody want that? Huh? Keep those words in mind, because they will come up later. The fight inevitably comes to an end as they wake up on the shore. Despite everything that happened, Denji's still willing to forgive Reze, run away with her even. That's where Reze comes clean. Everything that happened between the two up to now was all an act. Smiling, the blushing, the romance, all a lie. But it didn't faze Denji. He can't bring himself to kill her. It would make him feel guilty. Our villainess walks off after breaking his neck and leaving him not with despair but hope. She'd be at the cafe. Little did we know, this was the last time we or Denji would see Reze. At least until the final fight of the manga. Before she could resume life before all of this mess, Makima deals the killing blow as Denji sits alone, flowers clutched tightly. To me, the relationship between Denji and Reze is that of Kenshin and Tomoe. At first, Tomoe is out for revenge. She wanted Kenshin dead. He had stolen her happiness from her. He killed her fiancé. Despite this, somewhere down the line, she fell in love with Kenshin while pretending. She saw another side of him. Alas, it could not be together, as the hit was already placed on Kenshin's head, leading to Tomoe's tragic death. Now, the circumstances aren't one-to-one, but the core idea of these love stories are the same, to me at least. But while Tomoe and Kenshin had months for their love to bloom, to my knowledge, this arc takes place within a few days, weeks at most. So it's safe to say that Reze didn't actually love Denji, but she at least began to warm up to him and felt bad for deceiving him. Or perhaps she just didn't want to see him die. With Reze's chapter coming to an end, let's shift gears to the central focus of this video, the interesting relationship between our protagonist, Denji, and Power. Power makes her first appearance in chapter 4, appropriately titled Power. This is where Makima introduces it to, not before Denji has an external crisis of sorts wanting to touch boobs, something that drives all of Denji's actions throughout this arc. These trivial things when isolated seem just that, trivial. Fujimoto is trying to communicate here. Rather, he wants us not to forget that Denji is just a teenager trying to do teenage boy things in a world that either won't let him or won't make it easy for him. Power's not like every other woman we've seen before or after. Her introduction, at least when it comes to Denji's life, isn't comforting and warm like Reze. She isn't a savior like Makima, and most likely because she has nothing to hide like the other two. She's honest in how she acts. She's brash, rude, unapologetic, and not very ladylike. She's full of herself and cowardly and a liar. All very unpleasant traits. First impressions are everything, as the saying goes, and as far as Denji and the audience is concerned, Power left a very bad taste in our mouths. And it only gets worse. We do get a vulnerable moment with Power in this chapter though, venting to Denji about her cat, Meowie. Denji naturally doesn't care. I mean, why would he? He never wanted to be partnered up with her in the first place, but she persuades him with the promise of touching her chest if he helped. Naturally, he does just that. But what would be seen as a lighthearted moment soon turned into something far more sinister. We move on to chapter 6. Denji and Power share a moment on the train. He tries in a weird way to comfort her by opening up about his lost pet Puchita, but Power doesn't really care. To put it bluntly, she doesn't believe in all that alive in your heart mumbo jumbo. Denji is obviously put down by this, but he stays strong in the hopes of feeling up some boobs when this is all over. With this exchange, we have a really amazing scene where Denji thinks to himself, "There's no way I could be friends with this chick." This thought is followed by a beautiful panel showing the isolation and distance between the two. Given the context of later events, it just serves as Fujimoto laying out all his chess pieces in perfect order, securing his victory before the match has even begun. Going back to what Denji had said to Reze, the same thing happens here. Another woman in his life trying to kill him. Power tells Denji that her story was, like many other things she says, a lie. She did need Denji's help saving her pet Meowie, but not in the way he would have thought. The only way her cat would have been saved was in exchange for human blood. Denji just happened to be the unlucky donor. The Bat Devil deems his blood unworthy and in turn punishes Power by eating Meowie and then eating her as well. Before she is swallowed whole, she looks at Denji, recounting his story on the train ride earlier. He said, "You can't pet Puchita anymore. I know how you feel. It's an awful feeling, isn't it?" Denji comes to her rescue. Even though he had every right to let her die for what she did to him, he still sympathizes with her, looking back on all the good memories he himself had with Puchita, wondering if their experience could be mirrored. In chapter 8, we have a bit of Power's backstory, at least when it comes to Meowie, but this isn't my main concern. When she holds Meowie to her chest, it fades to the current time. She describes the feeling of blood being warm as the scene transforms yet again into something more. With Denji holding her in his arms gently, he had become a savior for her. What Makima had done for him, he had done for Power in a sense. Now, if we look at the scene deeper, her words could also be used not only to describe blood, but Denji's warmth. The subtlety in the artwork here, the look on both of their faces, the way Denji holds her, making sure she's properly elevated. I would argue that this is the moment that sparks something, not in Denji, but Power. This is the start of their complicated relationship. Denji leans in closer as Power asks. Denji, without saying anything, alludes to touching her chest. Back to square one, I suppose. Power then apologizes for deceiving him. Honestly speaking, I find this very human for her, and it serves as great character development. Moving forward, Denji vouches for Power. Despite everything that happened, even Aki alluding to knowing the truth of the matter, he still took that risk for her. Our spunky fiend moves in with our pair as more of her traits come to a head. She barely bathes, she doesn't flush. Again, first appearances are everything, and Power right now is very far from what Denji would consider a dream girl. She doesn't have the mysticism that Makima exudes, nor does she have the same feminine charm as Reze or Makima. That doesn't stop Denji from finding her attractive as he's about to get his reward. 3 chest squeezes, but it doesn't live up to Denji's expectations, which were extremely high. After all, he risked his life just to feel some boobs. But after he got what he wanted, it wasn't fulfilling. Maybe it was because Power's chest wasn't what he thought it was, her wearing pads and all. Or maybe it was because he had held something so trivial to an unreasonably high pedestal. Now we need to cut back to Makima for a moment. Denji is still very upset at what happened, expressing it to Makima. Here, she does what she does best. Manipulates Denji sexually, getting intimate with him. Given the fact that Denji has an unhealthy obsession with Makima, this just sends him into overdrive. Moving on from this, we go right back to where we left off on my last point. Reze had been killed, and Denji sat alone clutching flowers at the cafe. He's holding on to hope. This is where Fujimoto makes it abundantly clear the direction Denji and Power's relationship is going, at least to me. The owner of the cafe is reasonably annoyed. Denji won't go home and it's past closing time. He expresses Reze was out of his league, and what happened next is amazing foreshadowing for later events if I've ever seen it. He expresses to Denji that he'll meet the girl who's right for him eventually, and then the door cracks. We already know it can't be Reze, so the next possible conclusion could be Makima. But no, it's Power. The door cracks and Denji initially is excited, but then he sees Power. She followed his scent here. She's in love with the flowers Denji has, exclaiming that they're perfect for her as she blushes looking at him. Fujimoto brilliantly breaks up the tension of the scene by having Denji consume the flowers. He does just enough to plant a seed, but not too much. After all, it wouldn't make sense for these characters to just break out into some overly romantic scene right about now.
Something that should also be noted that I didn't mention earlier is Denji and Power spend a lot of time together. They train together, they spend their days off together, and while these may not seem important now, it's worth mentioning at this moment because this fact comes up later. The next interaction I'd like to take note of is the start of the Darkness Devil arc. Denji, Aki, and Power have a moment together. Power is upset that she isn't rewarded for her hard work. Aki concedes, asking her what she wants, making a ludicrous claim of wanting to suck a human's blood till he dies. Aki agrees as he places that responsibility on Denji. Now, before I talk about why this is so important, there's something you need to understand about this channel. Here, I try to look at every little detail. Sometimes we miss things, even on subsequent rereads or rewatches. I want to go beyond the deep dive and truly dissect and analyze as much as I can when constructing these videos. The little things in particular serves as foreshadowing, and again, I bring it up now, but we'll cross that bridge along with my earlier observations when we get there. Trust me, everything will make sense when we enter the final stretch of this analysis. Chapter 71 is an important chapter. It's important for this video, but I'm not gonna say what you think I will. This chapter opens up on the aftermath of the Darkness Devil arc. Power is traumatized, she seeks comfort within Denji, and Denji does play that role of comforter towards her. He tries everything he can just to keep her as calm as possible, even losing sleep and doing something that chapters earlier he would never do as a character. Denji is continuously taking on the responsibility of calming down Power throughout this chapter. He feeds her as the panel compares their relationship to his and Makima's, showing how different these two relationships are. It frames Denji as more compassionate and caring person, something that he struggled with at the start of the series. It also shows a drastic difference in relationship dynamics. Makima cleans the rice off his face with her thumb before placing said thumb into her mouth. A small tactic yet manipulative, she is casually asserting her dominance over Denji. This in turn builds as she offers him to go with her on a trip. Just the two of them. Denji, however, refuses her. This was the big shock to me. He had again assumed the responsibility of looking after Power, but despite the fact that Makima had offered to let her stay at the public safety facility, Denji is torn, but ultimately decides to turn her down. For the first time since Reze, he actively turns away from Makima. However, this time there was far less resistance. It shows his growth as a character, his maturity to put others above himself. As Power clings to Denji, Aki asks why he didn't go. Denji simply retorts, he doesn't know. What I find funny is that throughout the series from this point and beyond, Power is constantly clinging to Denji. Despite her relationship with Aki being almost the same, she confides in Denji. She comes to him when he's on the toilet, for Christ's sake. She's comfortable around him. It screams to me that this outcome was foreshadowed all the way in chapter 6, when he saved her from the Bat Devil, or the Darkness Devil arc, where he risks his life for her so that she wouldn't be turned into a doll. Power sees Denji as a protector despite his own inadequacies with himself. She puts her trust in him, and that's beautiful. This is when it gets more intimate as the two share a bath together. He leans in closer as he speaks. This doesn't feel erotic at all, and that's weird to him. He doesn't understand why. Later that night, they share another moment. As she sleeps with Denji, she opens up and cries, hoping that he doesn't hate her. She feels bad for getting between his trip with Makima for her sake. Denji shrugs this off, but Power persists with her apology, offering him to drink her blood. Remember earlier what Aki promised her? It comes full circle, but instead of her being the one to ingest his blood, it's the inverse. The next panel is beautifully illustrated. Fujimoto uses inherently sexual posing to change Denji's worldview as a character, to challenge his idea of love, his idea of sex. He monologues to himself. Puchida, Makima told me that naughty things feel better the more you know your partner. But even though I know Power really well, it doesn't feel hot at all. He continues to think to himself, coming to the conclusion that maybe knowing any and everything about a person you're intimate with isn't true. Thinking that if he knew all the assassins and everyone he had killed personally, it would make him feel crappy. Again, foreshadowing for when he kills Aki. But this entire little monologue is powerful, it's beautiful. What Denji and Power exhibit is a real healthy relationship. Given the circumstances of the bath, it would feel inconsistent and stunt his growth as a character to start having sexual thoughts while Power is in a very vulnerable state. It would paint Denji in a negative light, and he would be something that he's not. Denji cares more about Power's well-being, that he is able to subconsciously brush aside any sexual urges he might feel. And this is powerful given the fact that he is only 16 and has shown sexual attraction to Power before when she had promised him he could grope her. Let's take into consideration every time Denji let his lust control his actions, it had ended poorly for him. Even with Power almost being killed by the Bat Devil, then almost being killed by Reze, and being manipulated by Makima into killing his friends. Fujimoto keeps implementing these small things that convey a certain message between the two. Power throughout the series has also been shown to be very possessive of Denji. After she conquers her darkness devil fears, we see all three of them sleeping together. Denji's hand is holding her waist. When she begins to live with them, her shirt says "Love Radio," the cafe owner's words to Denji, among other things that I've spoken about in this video. Fujimoto's writing and visual storytelling is grossly underrated, to me at least. A lot of people focus on the words but not the things surrounding them. Anime and manga are visual mediums after all. The story is told through words and images. Allow me to elaborate using an example. Let's take a peek at Aki's character. He's a straight shooter who finds sympathizing, befriending, or even living with devils abhorrent. But soon after meeting Denji, he's peeling apples for him as he sits by his bed in a hospital room while he heals from the Bat Devil incident. Aki Hayakawa expresses concern for a devil. His acts are far more powerful than his words. Fujimoto's literature revolves around this theme. Denji's description of not feeling naughty or erotic while mating with Power was simply his realization that one may and can be intimate with someone without being sexual. Denji is indeed figuring out and learning about the intricacies of relationships. He's discovering that physical intimacy with a partner doesn't have to be obviously sexual all the time. In certain cases, intimacy and proximity are for the sake of comfort. Other times, it's for the purpose of strengthening a relationship by extending another's physical limits. It is sometimes sexual, other times it's romantic, and other times it is platonic. The aftermath of Aki's death brings Power and Denji closer. Denji in fact gets to live out a dream he had proclaimed at the start of chapter 1. When speaking to Pochita, Denji said that he'd flirt with a girl. They'd play video games together in their room and he'd fall asleep in her arms. In this chapter, he talks about playing video games with Power. He rents a new apartment, and throughout the series, he and Power have been sleeping together, more so her in Denji's arms than what he initially wanted. Not too long after, Power is killed by Makima. This is where Makima reveals, similar to Aizen, she had been controlling Denji's entire life, perfectly orchestrating everything. She says that she gave him a brother with Aki and a bratty little sister with Power. As Denji's on the verge of being killed by Makima, he's saved by none other than Power, all because of that blood he had drank earlier. She fights tooth and nail to protect Denji, but suddenly the events change as if Makima is exercising her control ability. Power almost gives up Denji to her before all of their memories flash before her, every intimate moment, causing her to defy Makima. Even she doesn't understand why she did it. But alas, she retreats into a dumpster as a similar scene plays out to that of chapter 1 and 2, where Pochita makes a contract with Denji. Fujimoto uses a panel from Denji's first meeting with Power, a panel right before he saves her life, but the dialogue is changed. Power expresses that all lives are equal, important, but Denji can't die because he was her first friend. Honestly, that tears me up every time I read it. It could be interpreted in many ways, but I'll get into that later. They too share a powerful moment where Denji recounts his life. He had fulfilled his dreams. He flirted with a girl, which I assume he's talking about Reze. He got to play video games with Power, and I'm assuming Aki, and he slept next to Power. All of his dreams stated in chapter 1 had been accomplished. He doesn't want to live anymore. He even remarked that Power won't be there if he were to return to the world of the living. He misses Power so much that he refuses to do anything, or rather, he can't do anything. Power gives Denji the last bit of motivation he needs, giving him hope that the two would see each other again, and that they could be buddies again. The two form a contract, and the events of the ending unfold. Now that that's all over, let's look at a few things. I said earlier that I had issue with people using Makima's words as definitive proof. After all, Makima isn't there 24/7. She doesn't know everything that's happening behind closed doors. She just executes what she believes would happen. Regardless of if Power and Denji's relationship were really that of siblings, it doesn't matter because Makima still accomplished what she set out to do. I would argue the fact that Power and Denji became so close was the catalyst that led to Makima's defeat in the first place, because Power was the one that gave Denji that last bit of strength that he needed to defeat Makima. Now, as we saw, Reze had died. Her body was taken over by Makima and Denji had no remorse for killing her. It isn't crazy to assume that Denji had moved on, but it could also be stated that he had no time to worry about Reze. Or maybe I'm just looking too deep into this whole Reze thing. Now I'm going to throw a counter argument to myself. It could be interpreted due to Denji not having any siblings that everything that had happened between him and Power is what he would assume normal sibling relationships be. It could even be said for Power, even more so, but I don't believe this. I think Denji has enough understanding to surmise siblings don't do what he and Power did. As for Power, I could counter-argue with her being afraid of getting naughty, or even enjoying Denji touching her chest. However, most of her words come off as platonic, calling Denji her buddy, her first friend, but not once do Denji and Power refer to themselves as siblings. All in all, I think Tatsuki Fujimoto clearly portrays a lot of sexual undertones with the pair, romantic undertones even, yet still using platonic vocabulary. He wants this relationship to be ambiguous, leaving it up for readers' interpretations, so he sprinkles in a lot of conflicting language both visually and vocally. Some of it goes unnoticed at first, but when you reread the series it starts becoming more apparent. One last sentiment, even if he did want the two to be seen purely as siblings, Fujimoto himself has a very complicated thought process, at least in his stories, when it comes to siblings. Look at Fire Punch for example. It has a lot of very incestual things going on in the manga between the main character and his sister. Chainsaw Man to me is a series that is about characters trying to find their place in the world, trying to understand things without anyone to guide them. Denji is his own teacher when it comes to things such as love and relationships. I truly believe that Fujimoto was trying to communicate that Power was the ideal woman for Denji, but he just couldn't see it. Whether it be due to Makima's ability as the control devil, or for the simple fact that he himself had no idea what love really is and how it's supposed to be. Makima may have been his first crush. He may even say that he loves her, but I believe Power is the girl that he truly loved.
Aki Hayakawa is one of the most interesting characters in Chainsaw Man, and his death is one of the saddest moments in the entire manga. It's also the catalyst for not only Power's death, but Denji's descent into fully becoming the Chainsaw Man. So let's talk about it.
Where have you been?
The first time we see Aki, he's very jaded in his worldview. A no-nonsense devil hunter with only one goal: revenge. He dislikes Denji and the idea of living with him. He criticizes him for sympathizing with devils and is strongly against the idea of Denji befriending one, something ironically enough Aki is guilty of later in the series. In fact, this is foreshadowed when he not only watches over Denji as he rests in the hospital, but even goes as far as to pardon him for covering for Power, who prior tried to kill him by feeding him to the Bat Devil, in exchange for Denji's loyalty of course. Something that I'm sure Aki knows fully well that there's a 50-50% chance of him getting. The way I see it, he was just bluffing to keep up appearances.
Please don't take off my mask, revealing dark.
Aki goes on to say that he will not make friends with devils. In chapter 13 we learn of his origins. Well, we already knew them, vaguely, but now we get to see them with our own eyes. The Gun Devil blows away his house along with his parents and younger brother right before him. Now the way this backstory was set up, it would seem that it was just an introduction for the Gun Devil. Only later we find out that it was Aki's actual backstory, and I cannot describe how amazing that was done. The panel of young Aki's face next to the current Aki. Later we're introduced to Himeno. We learn during Aki's adolescence they were buddies, and her backstory doesn't only give more depth to him, but pushes more foreshadowing onto the viewer, as we get a look at him repeating his classic line even all the way back then: "I'm not here to make friends." We learn that Himeno has feelings for Aki, and she's so adamant on wanting him to live a very long life, a mindset that Aki inherits later down the line. During the events of the Eternity Devil arc, he risks his life for Denji by taking a stab wound. He says that he will not let him die. He elaborates on this by saying he needs Denji alive so he can help him kill the Gun Devil, something that Denji does indeed end up doing, but more on that later. Himeno, all the way back then, tried to talk Aki out of fighting the Gun Devil, but Aki isn't willing to give up his goal. Not yet anyway. We see more of his true side open up during the Katana Man arc, when both Denji and Himeno are left beaten and on the verge of death. Denji being dead already, the look on his face at not only the thought of Himeno, but Denji of all people dying, is telling, and it's just even more heartbreaking when Himeno actually dies a few pages later, sacrificing herself so that Aki could continue on living. Her death leaves us with more information about Aki. Devil hunters get used to the constant death, but he still hasn't. All things considered, Aki is still very young. He's way in over his head in a job that not only robs him of his life, but robs him of his friends and family as well. We find out that Aki only has 2 years to live. He uses a cursed sword that greatly depletes his lifespan. A sword that was made by another devil that he would soon form a partnership with, putting even more pressure on himself. Later, all this comes to a head when he reads one of the letters Himeno left her sister. One thing that stood out was in one of her letters, she asked how could she make him quit, something that she has tried many a times. This does plant a seed, but it's not the final nail in the coffin to make him give up on pursuing the Gun Devil. Later, he forms a contract with the future devil, who not only informs him, but the readers, that Aki will die in the worst possible way imaginable. But even that does not deter him. He does not care what happens to him, as long as his mission is complete. We see his relationship with Denji slowly get stronger as they take turns kicking the shit out of the Katana Man, slowly breaking free of his no-nonsense ways. Not long after, under Makima's orders, he partners up with the Angel Devil. While at first he cannot stand him, the two become very close as they share secrets with each other. Aki even going as far as to willingly shorten his own lifespan by saving the Angel Devil's life. He had begun to sympathize and befriend devils, a practice he once criticized Denji for. In chapter 72 is where Aki's arc comes to an end for me. He's grown so much since his first introduction. This chapter slows down the pace of the manga as we get a look into his life with Power and Denji, the bond between these three growing remarkably. He takes the two of them on his annual visit to the grave of his dead family, and he finally gets the closure that he deserved. He's given up on his dream of killing the Gun Devil in order to protect his new family. He was able to finally free himself of the pain and hurt from all those years ago, finally able to let go of that guilt he feels for his brother's death. In doing so, he pulls his squad, Division 4, out of the Gun Devil's expedition. It's only later he's manipulated by Makima into joining the expedition once again, as she basically forces Denji and Power to go along, regardless of Aki being there or not. Later, he's given a future that's unavoidable, one that he tries to change, but in doing so sets the events in motion. During his visit to the Angel Devil, who's lost his arms during the Darkness Devil incident, they discuss it. Aki not only wants to save Power and Denji from this future, but also the Angel Devil as well, knowing full well that the organization will just dispose of him. Due to his lack of having no arms, he'd be seen as useless. His solution? Talk to Makima. He cries in front of Makima. He wants Denji and Power to live long, happy lives, even when he's gone. He informs her that his time is almost up. He doesn't want what happened to his brother to happen to them. He asks her for strength to change things. He's willing to make a contract with any devil, any contract, and thus he is forced to make one with Makima herself, the Control Devil. The haunting reveal afterwards, I can't even describe it. Aki becomes the one thing his entire arc has been based around, the thing that he has sought to destroy and then gave up on. Aki had become the thing that robbed him of his family long ago, and the thing that pushes Denji to rob himself and Power of their lives. Aki becomes the Gun Devil, and he's forced to kill Denji and Power. This fight is honestly heartbreaking. Watching Denji struggle, having to kill someone akin to his brother, whilst Aki is unaware of his actions, thinking that it's all a snowball fight. As his consciousness puts him back in that time all those years ago when him and his brother were about to play catch, turning into a snowball fight between him and Denji. The fight stops when Aki sees a young Denji crying before him. Remarks on he's never seen Denji cry before, and then Denji disappears. Aki looks around, and that's where he utters his final words. "Oh yeah, I wanted to play catch anyway." Slashes forward to our present day. Aki brutally killed by Denji's hands. After Aki's death, Denji mourns him in a scene that's very similar to Jiraiya being mourned by Naruto, which I thought was an excellent touch. As the events are set in motion as predicted by the future devil, Power is also killed by Denji, technically at least. The saddest part about this all, yet again, Aki has failed to protect the ones that he loved. Aki died for the simple fact that he was still sane, a concept that had been foreshadowed all the way back in chapter 19. Aki overcame his hatred for devils, overcame his guilt, and put aside his unrealistic quest for revenge, but it was far too late for him by that time. This is someone that went from wanting to kill devils in ways that would make them suffer as much as possible and detesting the idea of befriending them, to willingly sleeping in the same bed as them, risking his life for them, giving up his dreams because he's seen them suffer as much as possible. Hell, he's even concerned about Power having nightmares. Aki's character growth is amazing. It's revealed that in his will, Aki left half of his money with Denji and the other half with Himino's family. Aki was human to the very end, and he was one of the most genuine characters in the entire Chainsaw Man manga. He died with a smile on his face as he regained his childhood innocence and was able to see his brother again and finish their game of catch. Aki Hayakawa is a definition of a tragic character, and even though he couldn't save Power, his sacrifice ultimately led to Denji becoming the man that he is today. So in the end, his death served as a change, a positive one, for the future of the Chainsaw Man universe.
Chainsaw Man is a series rich in storytelling. Tatsuki Fujimoto asked his readers to think deeper about his story, to look at every aspect written and unwritten, and come to conclusions he himself has not concretely written out for them. Like most thought-provoking forms of art, it makes you feel things, asks you questions, and expects you to come to your own conclusions. Today I want to take a look at Makima and Nayuta, and how her introduction to the series is ironic and shows Makima's greatest flaw, her arrogance, and similar to Denji, her admiration. While Denji admired her to an unhealthy degree, Makima admired the Chainsaw Man in a similar vein. These two factors blinded her to the potential and the relationships Denji had formed throughout the series, completely shattering her plans. But before I get into that, if you like this kind of content, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification so you never miss a video. I frequently make these types of analysis videos on anime, manga, and video games, so if that's what you're into, stick around and let's watch this channel grow. Thank you all for 2,000 subscribers. Let's get the channel to 5,000 next. And with that, let's continue the video. Makima had orchestrated many parts of Denji's life akin to what Aizen did to Ichigo. She was so fixated on her plan that she failed to see the extent of the relationships Denji had created, or more appropriately, the relationships that she created for Denji. Power was more than a sister. What Denji and Power had was intimate, it was special, it was romantic, it was the catalyst that led to Makima's defeat. Similar to Aki Hayakawa, he was one of Denji's first friends, his best friend, his brother. Aki and Power made a great sacrifice, which was what I said prior led to Makima's defeat. Now, I won't go into detail with these things. If you do want my full thoughts on Aki Hayakawa, I've already done an analysis video on him that I'll link in the description, The Tragedy of Aki Hayakawa. And if you want my thoughts on Power and Denji's relationship and why I think it's more than solely platonic, I'll leave that video in the description as well, the complicated relationship of Power and Denji. If Makima hadn't introduced these factors into Denji's life, she would have most likely been able to accomplish her goal, which mind you, was not an evil one. She just went about it the wrong way, which is something very common in anime and manga. Makima reminds me of a few Naruto antagonists, Obito Uchiha, Madara Uchiha, and Nagato Uzumaki. In fact, her entire plan is very reminiscent of the Infinite Tsukuyomi, at least the idea around it. Now before we get into Makima, let's look at Obito, Madara, and Nagato and see what we can learn from them, their ideals, their motivations, and their endgame. Nagato helped Yaiko build the Akatsuki because they wanted to achieve world peace. As a result of Yahiko's death, Nagato became misdirected in his pursuit for peace, creating the alter ego of pain, and attempting to impose peace into the world by subjecting everyone to the same suffering.
Those who do not know pain will never understand true peace. This world shall know pain. Almighty push!
In the wake of witnessing Rin's death, Obito longed for peace. He couldn't bear the thought of living in a world where an innocent girl had her life snatched away by conflict. Obito Uchiha's adversity as a child, the trauma of Rin's death, and Madara's indoctrination led to a profoundly misguided young man who intended to achieve world peace by casting an infinite genjutsu, establishing a perfect world built on illusion.
I get it. I'm in hell.
Madara was born into a period of conflict which he and Hashirama despised. Both of them desired world peace, but while Hashirama believed that humans were fundamentally good and capable of achieving this on their own, Madara believed that people were fundamentally evil and incapable of such. Rather than wasting time persuading them, he desired to employ the infinite Tsukiyomi to force everyone to conform to his definition of peace, again creating a world of illusion, a perfect world.
I'm leaving the village. I found a different path, a different way. I can see it only because we have bared our insides to each other. Cooperation is merely a quieter form of conflict.
Here is a glance at Makima's ultimate goal. Makima, like the other three Naruto antagonists I mentioned, desired a world free of fear, death, and pain. In other words, she desired peace. We'll get to the second element of Makima's goal later on in this analysis. But these characters shared a desire for peace, but they go about it in a terrible manner, through manipulation and fear, ironically. The second element of Makima's goal was to spend the rest of her days with Pochita and enjoy his company. When she couldn't build equal and genuine relationships as the control devil, she constantly longed for something like a family. Quite ironic. She was able to orchestrate a family for Denji and many friends from Aki to Power, Beam, Kobeni, Kishibe, but she could never do the same for herself. At least, she couldn't make it genuine. She had her own unhealthy obsession with Pochita, similar to what Denji had with her. Because she was so preoccupied with her own fixation, she failed to see that introducing other people into Denji's life would help him break his own fixations. Makima wanted to give Denji a life and then slowly take away everything from him so that she could have the Chainsaw Man for herself. But as I keep reiterating, she only planned for Power and Aki. She didn't anticipate Denji would form more friendships and deepen relationships along the way. Someone should have told her Shonen Jump's 3 core values. Makima is the perfect mirror to Denji. They both yearn for family, to be loved. Denji had no one besides Pochita. He was content, whilst Makima had everyone, but it was superficial, based on control. It wasn't enough for her. It was fake. She could make everyone in the world love her, but not Pochita. She, similar to Denji, did not understand love and relationships. She thought she did. It's why she couldn't fathom how Pochita could love someone like Denji. To her, was a bad person. Makima does not grow. Unlike Denji, despite being older and wiser, she does not try to change. While Denji embarks on a hero's journey, his coming-of-age story, Makima is regressing as her facade of this perfect woman crumbles. From the moment Makima and Denji had crossed paths, her fate was sealed. There was no way Pochita would ever let someone like Makima control him. We see it throughout the series. While Denji is affected, Pochita's eyes are always open to the truth. When Denji asks Pochita if he can guess what girl he likes, he goes through it in this order. Power, the person who ultimately gave Denji everything he would want in a partner. Angel Devil, who wasn't a woman but played a very important role nonetheless. One of Aki Hayakawa's best friends throughout the series, and a valuable ally. Kobeni, who at first let her anxiety get the better of her, almost killing Denji, but ended up becoming a friend who gave Denji the final push he needed to defeat Makima by grounding him after all he had been through prior. Reze, who was Denji's first taste at love, but alas she manipulated him and caused him far more harm than good. Followed lastly by Makima, who was a sickness, a poison that detested Denji and had only wished for his downfall. Her yearning for the love of Pochita, mixed with her hubris on top of looking down on humans as they were animals, destroyed her. In my recent video, as I said before, I go into great length on Makima's claim that she gave Denji and Power a sibling relationship, which I think is ironic. If you haven't seen that video yet, as I said, I highly recommend it. Chapter 95, pages 14 to 15 really stood out to me. It perfectly captures Makima's flaws and her state of mind. During Makima and Denji's battle, she gains the upper hand. But before she deals the killing blow, she stops to berate Denji. Chainsaw Man doesn't spit. Chainsaw Man doesn't wear clothes and doesn't talk. Every action he takes should be chaotic. And yet, despite not getting him at all, you were chosen by Chainsaw Man. Juxtapose this to what Pochita said in chapter 97, pages 16 and 17. Denji, my dream was to have someone hug me. Sounds easy, right? Except I'm too strong, so it's actually really hard. But you made my dream come true. Similar to Makima, Pochita had power, but no companionship. With great power comes great loneliness, great isolation. However, with great power must also come great responsibility. With Denji, Pochita was able to fulfill his dream. His power was used to save people, while Makima used hers to instill fear. Because of Makima's own inadequacies, she was unable to see that not only Denji and her were similar, but Pochita as well. And that's why he and Denji were able to click together so well. Makima's idolization of the Chainsaw Man blinded her from the possibility that he could be just like her, assuming she even acknowledged her own weakness to begin with. When the Control Devil was reincarnated as Nayuta, Makima found that she had become the sister she had entrusted to Denji opposed to Power. The same person she had scorned was the one to ultimately take care of her. Despite everything she had done to him, Denji was able to put all of that aside. He was the first and only person to truly love her. None of the plethora of Chainsaw Man characters Tatsuki Fujimoto has created is more nuanced, well written, and real as Denji. Despite my love for Aki Hayakawa and Power, despite the hours upon hours of discussion I can have about Makima alone and how perspective can utterly change her character in one way or the other, despite the videos I could make about the limitless possibilities a character like Asa can provide to the story, none of these characters hold a candle to the series' main protagonist, Denji. I've already made a video that goes into Denji somewhat, so I'm going to try my best not to repeat some of those talking points here, but the information will naturally overlap. Before we get into it, welcome to the channel. I do these types of analytical content on anime, manga, video games, and all things pop culture. And if you're a fan of this and want to support this channel, please do consider subscribing, leaving a like, and a comment down below. If you want to take that support another step, I also have a collaboration with Boomslank. If you want to pick up some dope anime inspired merchandise, use my referral link code for 10% off, and I have a Patreon. And with all of that out of the way, let's get into today's video. Denji may seem simple on the surface, and for the most part he is, but there's layers under that simplicity, which is deceptively complex. I just don't like the idea of Denji's motivations being boiled down to him being horny or just wanting to touch breasts, because that couldn't be further from the truth. While they are aspects of his character, and most of the time they're played for jokes, there's something deeper than these desires, and it all starts from the beginning. Denji comes from nothing. He's an orphan that lives in poverty, risking his life on a daily basis, hunting devils to repay a debt that isn't even his, dreaming of a better life in the process, or something more normal for a boy his age. He wants a girlfriend, he wants to eat bread and jam, to have cake, to play video games, and to have a normal, comfortable life. He wants to be treated like a human and to be given the same basic luxuries that normal humans have. After becoming a hybrid, he's willing to die to preserve this way of life. This is where we get into the first big thing people criticize about him: the want to feel boobs. Denji is 16 at the start of the story. It's quite reasonable for a 16-year-old to want to engage in something a little bit more adult. After all, this is the period in life where hormones take center stage, and given that Denji has been robbed of the pleasures of a normal life, it fits with his character.
He even laments on the fact that this was a dream of his that he had forgotten. It's quite sad to think that Denji relegated himself to the idea of just living the life he had with Puchita for the rest of his life, in a crummy shack, dreaming of bread and jam, paying a debt for the rest of his life. I do want to touch on Denji's relationship with sex a little bit more, but I'll do that a little bit later in this video. Then there's the other half of Denji's character, slowly becoming human. Now, Denji is a human in a flesh and blood sense until he becomes the Chainsaw Man. But that's not what I'm talking about. Denji learns to become human in a moral sense. He has a whole crisis of wondering if he has a heart because in a literal sense, he lost his. Now, it should be undoubtable that Denji has a heart because of his love for Puchita, giving his body so that Puchita could live. But even with that in mind, he still lacks the understanding of complicated emotions. He's still learning the ins and outs of how society works and how being a regular person mostly works. He's met more people. No longer is it him and Puchita. He's starting to gain friends, family even. He's becoming more and more adjusted to his new life, and this fact leads to him questioning his humanity. Would he be sad if Aki died? What about power? The real question Denji is asking, does he have empathy? Denji is a social outcast, and with the exception of Puchita, his life has been surrounded by misfortune and danger, taking up the life of a devil hunter at a young age, putting his life at risk just so he's able to see another day. That's why he questions his empathy, because while the people in his day-to-day life don't necessarily treat him the best, there's nuances to the way they act, and Denji isn't an idiot. He can understand Aki's hate for devils. He can sympathize with Power's love for Maui. At first, he's under the impression he and Power could never be friends. He's not going to feel anything if anyone dies, but that's not true. He forms an unforgettable bond with Power and Aki. He makes more friends than he could count, and he's constantly put the needs of others before himself as the story goes along. That's why I think Denji is such an interesting and multi-layered character. He has introspection. The moments where he talks to himself and questions the world around him, when he's watching movies with Makima, or wondering if there was another way to deal with Aki transforming into the gun fiend. One of his strongest assets is his will to continue fighting. Chainsaw Man Part 2 has opened up new doors for Denji as Fujimoto expands on what he's already written in Part 1. The fact that Denji deals with grief by ignoring it could be seen as not healthy, and to an extent it isn't. But the way I see it, Denji's trauma has been used against him to mentally break him and make him easy to manipulate. I see this as Denji taking a mental precaution, so something like that would never happen again, especially with the falling devil. He can't afford to lose himself again for Nayuta's sake. Another aspect of Denji I find interesting but I see being criticized is something that I spoke briefly on earlier, his obsession with sex. I think it's deeper than just the surface level though. Every single romantic or sexual experience for Denji has been tainted, and we see him learn from that. His first kiss, someone vomited in his mouth. He's taken note of that and closes his mouth when Yoru makes advances on him. The first time he touched boobs, they were pads. Sex is his last bastion. And I know in today's society sex isn't treated nearly as it was back in the day, being seen as a sacred act that's performed by two people who love each other, another step within a relationship that's a level of intimacy surpassing most things. Sex is just the top layer, but if we look deeper, Denji is just a young man that wants and needs physical intimacy. It's something he has been deprived of. He wants to be loved unconditionally, and to him, the act of sex is honest. For someone to bare their most vulnerable side to one another is true love, or at least that's what we can take away from it. His relationship with sex becomes entangled with his own development, emotions, and comprehension of human connections as the manga goes more deeply into Denji's character development. Denji's relationships and experiences influence how he views intimacy, allowing for a more complex examination of his needs and the significance he associates with sexual intimacy. Denji's struggle with grief, deceit, and self-sacrifice provide an additional lens through which to examine his development. He's forced to examine his own limitations and consider his life's purpose as a result of these hardships.
Denji experiences emotional upheaval, self-reflection, and internal conflicts through his journey as he questions his own desires, identity, and purpose of his life. He begins to develop deep bonds with other characters as the show goes on. These connections progressively alter Denji's perspective on the world and makes him rethink his initial egotistical and hedonistic outlook. He starts to exhibit a willingness to defend and make sacrifices for his friends, as well as a growing sense of duty towards others, especially Nayutsu's well-being. But it's kind of unfair to say that Aki and Power instilled this in Denji, as early on in the series he has exhibited these traits. However, I would like to say Aki and Power did contribute to the man he is today. And when I say he's exhibited these traits earlier, if we go to a few examples, when he tries to run away with the little girl. Now, despite that having somewhat of a self-serving aspect because he didn't want to be treated bad like Makima, he was still willing to risk his life to protect someone in a sense. We also see this again even earlier with Puchita, as I said before, and later down the line when he risks his life to save everyone during the Infinity Devil arc. Denji's transformation into a person who understands the value of compassion, sacrifice, and personal growth in Chainsaw Man is characterized by a change from a self-serving and rather impetuous person. What I find even more interesting, and something that Chainsaw Man Part 2 is going to touch upon, is Denji's idea of being a hero and what that means. Denji initially identifies himself as a hero because he wants a comfortable existence. And when I say hero, I don't mean in the typical sense, because Denji doesn't call himself a hero, but he is a savior, whether he likes it or not. As it stands, Denji's ego can be seen in his need for admiration and recognition. He craves approval and wants to be recognized as substantial or important. This ego-driven component of his character can occasionally cause him to act impulsively or dangerously in an effort to expose himself as Chainsaw Man. It's vital to remember, though, that Denji's conceit and ego are portrayed as character faults. He struggles with these sides of himself throughout the series and develops and matures. As of right now, Denji's life has evolved beyond his needs and his original dream. Instead of yearning to live a comfortable life, he wants to be a celebrity. Now that he's been placed in a precarious situation, he is being forced to reconsider his previous perspective and be grateful for everything that's in front of him and everything he has already been able to achieve. He must learn to curb his ambition and lead a modest life. I think Denji's character is moving in a direction of self-love. Denji needs to develop self-love and grow into the rock he so desperately needs. This is not to say Denji doesn't love himself, but he desires gratitude from others more than simply finding that gratification inward, and I think that's what Chainsaw Man Part 2 is going to tackle with Denji's character moving forward. I also do love the way that it takes Denji's character. He's always one step ahead. Like when Fumiko gropes him and offers sex, Denji already knows that it's a trap and he's on guard. It also shows how sharp of a fighter he is without relying on Chainsaw Man, but that's besides the point. Chainsaw Man is a lot of things, an action-packed shonen that flawlessly blends comedy and horror. It has a lot to say, so much so that I couldn't even begin to connect the dots and dissect every minute detail about it. The more I read this manga, the more videos I watch from other creators, and the more I learn about the story, the more I enjoy it. Yes, it has been a while since I've spoken about Chainsaw Man, this masterpiece, but here I am to discuss Chainsaw Man yet again, and a concept that I've done to death previously, a part of the series that people argue about rather than just simply listening to the song, if you will. The second chapter of the Chainsaw Man story, Chainsaw Man Part 2, is a love story. It's about two people who are looking for love. Amongst all of the action, comedy, the horror, it's a romance story. It's an aspect that was prevalent during Part 1 of Chainsaw Man. Denji was on the verge of finding his it girl, but it was cut short on multiple occasions. Now, before you start commenting about Denji and Power, please watch my videos on that subject. And for the returning viewers who still don't understand my point in those videos, let me tell you what I'm saying and let me tell you what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that Denji had romantic feelings for Power, even if I can make that argument given the context clues of Part 1 of Chainsaw Man and some stuff of Part 2 that I will talk about later. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that Denji and Power could have been something more, but that didn't happen because they didn't have enough time to bloom. Power was taking away from Denji while he was at his lowest. I also don't care that Makima said they're siblings, or that she wanted them to be siblings. I have made a video on that already, and again, Denji's actions kind of contradict that in part 2, but I'll talk about that later. Anyway, Makima took Reze before she and Denji could become more, and she took Power before her and Denji can become more. And what about Makima herself? Despite Denji's feelings for her, she was never in the cards in the first place. She was never an option. She was never a love interest for Denji, realistically speaking. We see that Denji's looking for a girlfriend in every chapter that involves him. At first it was dismissed as a joke that continued from the final chapter of part 1, but as of recent chapters, it's no joke. Denji is lonely and looking for companionship. He doesn't want to be single forever. He doesn't have anyone to call his own in a romantic sense. Day after day, he overworks himself for Nayuta's sake. You can tell by how exhausted he is. The bags under his eyes are a perfect example of this, a brilliant bit of visual storytelling that Fujimoto implores here. Not only that, but it implies that Denji's out fighting devils even in the early hours of the morning and during the darkest of nights, like some superhero who's always ready for the call. Kinda reminds me of how the symbiote would take over Peter's body and fight crimes while he was sleeping. It's not a one-for-one comparison, but it's a comparison nonetheless, and maybe it's an excuse to talk about that Spider-Man comic again. I can only imagine Denji's loneliness from his escapades in the first half of the story, where he had multiple relationships, both sexual and not, all being intimate in some aspect with not only people like Power and Aki, but Reze, Himano, Kobeni, albeit under false pretense, Makima herself, Kishibe even, to having to care for Nayuta and all of Makima's dogs. Yoshida, a relic from an almost forgotten era, that being the first half of Chainsaw Man and everything with Makima, is the only person in his life who interacts with him still. Since Makima's defeat, a lot has changed and the other horsemen have begun to emerge. Speaking of horsemen, we move on to Asa, the unfortunate host of Yoru, the war devil. In many ways, Asa is similar to Denji, but also very different. Fujimoto lays the groundwork from the first arc, moving from one main character to the next, while maintaining the familiarity, that deja vu of seeing this somewhere before, but not knowing where. Asa's parents are no longer in the picture. They were killed by devils, and she has a devil thrust upon her, a devil who is giving her a second chance at life, just like Puchita did for Denji. She, like him, begins the story alone. Also, like Denji, is looking for companionship. Right away, we see she wants friends, she wants a boyfriend, she's jealous of all the students in her class. She's a loner just trying to find her place in the world. She overthinks, she's anxious, she's just looking for somewhere she can fit in. When she's trapped in the aquarium, she feels like a failure when she breaks her phone, as she's exhausted that one usefulness she had in the group. Similar to Denji, when she comes into her own a bit, she is assigned to a team, just like Denji had Aki and Power. However, her only friend dies during the first part of the story, being a host for the Justice Devil, and well, you know what happens there. That's why when she meets Denji, their interaction at the aquarium, it was a breath of fresh air, not only for her, but for him. In some ways, he humbles Asa, brings her down to earth. A boring date becomes a genuine one, forcing Asa to confront the idea of her being a boring person. But is Asa really that dull? This dull personality was just created to overcompensate for her own insecurities and lack of self-awareness. She was putting in way too much effort. She was trying too hard. Something unfamiliar to Denji. He's always been straightforward and somewhat honest in how he presents himself. He's not exactly an open book, but not all the time at least. He leaves room for spontaneity. Now, he's a little more grounded, at least when he's with Asa. What I like about her is that she brings familiarity to Denji's life, to the story, in the form of an old friend. An old relationship that may be given a second chance to blossom and finally become something more, unless that character comes back. You all know what I'm talking about, of course. Denji says it himself. He likes her attitude. She reminds him of an old friend, and obviously he's talking about Power. Asa in herself resembles a lot of people in Denji's life, a lot of old love interests. Despite their alternate identities as Chainsaw Man and War Devil, Denji and Asa can be themselves. Two teenagers enjoying each other's company, trying to see where this date could take them, or so it should be, but things are never that simple when it comes to Chainsaw Man and Tatsuki Fujimoto. Something is always in the way of love and obstacles. These two have a number of them. It's like Romeo and Juliet, but with a lot more blood, gore, and devils. Even if we disregard Nayuta's interference with their date, the problems of hidden identities and ulterior motive still remains. Denji is Chainsaw Man, whom the War Devil Yoru, who resides within Asa, wants to kill, and Yoru will not leave Asa's body until she is able to do so. But that begs the question, we've never seen a devil part from its partner. Denji technically did, but power had already paved that way after he made a pact with her, giving him blood so that he could live. But what would happen to Asa's body if Yoru were to separate from her? Will she even be able to continue living? She was, after all, practically dead until Yoru took over her body. The aquarium date is special to me. I think it's important because even though the situation was dire, Denji was able to bring out the real Asa, the one that's hiding behind the insecurity, behind the overcompensation. She gave Denji another chance because she took the time to try and understand him, see who he is, not who she thought he is. She's hurt by the fact that Denji stood her up, at least from her perspective. We know the truth on that matter. She tries to talk herself into believing that she doesn't care, but Yoru is right. She might not be in love with Denji, but she likes him and he likes her. Or maybe she just likes someone that shows affection for her, something she hasn't felt in a long time. It's going to be interesting to see how this relationship plays out. Fujimoto already began playing his cards, and the closer these two get, the further they seem to stray apart. It's been nice talking about Chainsaw Man again. As you can see, I've continued my running theme when speaking about the series for the most part. I love looking at the irony, romance, and tragedy of Chainsaw Man. It's honestly my favorite aspect of the series. Asa and Denji have found themselves in the porcupine's dilemma. The closer they get to each other, it'll only end in suffering for both of them. One of them is going to kill each other, and from the way Yoru is connected with Asa, she might have feelings for Denji as well. And then there's the underlying issues of why she hates the Chainsaw Man, because she doesn't want to be forgotten. It's going to be interesting to see where this goes, and the ideas that both of these characters will challenge each other when it comes to love. Denji might finally understand what love truly is. He came close, but he wasn't there quite yet. A good movie can change your life. When I heard Makima say those words, I knew I had to make this video. Given the countless videos I've made talking about the Chainsaw Man anime before and after its serialization, and the countless Twitter arguments about Season 1's direction, it was inevitable that I would speak on this movie. From the first look at the new character designs, I knew something special was brewing. That feeling only became solidified with the first trailer. Chainsaw Man had finally embodied its manga roots. A vibrant color palette, mixed with designs that closely replicate Fujimoto's art style, was a sight to behold as manga panels were faithfully lifted from the page. Despite all these nods in the trailer, it couldn't prepare me for what I would witness as I sat in the theater for the next couple of hours. Words can't describe how I felt after the credits rolled. Finally, the Chainsaw Man adaptation of my dreams. It was vindicating to see every argument of how a more colorful adaptation wouldn't work, or it would be less cinematic, or even that the official color version of Chainsaw Man is not an accurate representation of the source material, despite most manga being overall based on the covers and the color pages present in said source material, with a few exceptions.
Reze arc proved that Chainsaw Man can be cinematic without losing the style present in the manga, which should have been obvious to anyone, but I don't just want to come here and talk about the direction or gloat. Let's swing back to what Makima said. Now, the Chainsaw Man movie didn't change my life, but it did change my perspective on season 1 of the anime. I still didn't like the direction of season 1 or the unnecessary cutting of material, which to be fair, wasn't much. However, given what that first arc was in the grand scheme of Chainsaw Man, it somewhat works in contrast with the movie. The Reze arc is the beginning of a shift in this story, with Reze elevating the stakes and action of Chainsaw Man. This sudden change is reflected in the tone and style of the movie, and for anime-only viewers, it offers them a taste of what's to come. To put it plainly, Chainsaw Man Season 1 is somewhat grounded, all things considered, and everything after that is the Chainsaw Man that us fans are accustomed to. But that's not the only perspective shift I had while viewing this film. I was never a big fan of the Reze arc, and while that hasn't changed, this movie made me a much bigger fan of the nuances of her character and how it relates to Denji. Reze and Denji's relationship is one of Chainsaw Man's most nuanced tragedies, built on mirroring traumas and impossible timing. Denji's a boy who desperately wants to be loved, while Reze is a girl who was never allowed to be human, raised as a weapon, though she's ordered to manipulate him. Reze's soft moments, her blushes, hesitation, and quiet stares reveal genuine affection breaking through her mission. Denji, who has only ever been used, mocked, or controlled, finally feels seen by her. Their simple school date symbolizes the normal life both were robbed of, and it's why she almost chooses freedom with him. A key contrast in this lies how Makima and Reze treat Denji. Makima gives him affection as a leash, controlling him through obedience and emotional starvation, treating him like a tool and a weapon rather than a person. Makima wants to hurt Denji. Reze, by contrast, treats him with warmth, curiosity, and sincerity, speaking to him gently, enjoying his company, and offering him moments of real humanity. The tragedy deepens because Reze genuinely tries to go back to him. She makes a choice for herself for once, yet never reaches him. Reze hesitated to hurt Denji, and Denji never learns that she cared or that Makima stole his chance at love from him. The dynamic ultimately captured Chainsaw Man's core theme. In a world ruled by violence and power, even the purest moments of connection are doomed, not because they aren't real, but because the world refuses to let them live. With all this talk of perspectives, I hope I was able to change your perspective on the idea of subscribing to the channel. It helps out a ton, more than you know. And while you're down there, feel free to check out the channel's continuous sponsor, Boomslang, a company that makes anime-inspired merchandise, specifically clothing. They have the new Zodiac line hoodies, which look stylish and comfortable, and using my referral links and my discount code, you get 10% off, I get a little cash back, and we all win. Let's get back to today's video. I think what really brings this home is how each character takes Denji out on a date. Makima's date is controlled, refined. There's not too much emotion. It's focused on one thing, a movie marathon. It leaves barely any interaction between the two because they spend most of their time in silence watching movies. Yes, the time they spent was long, but it really didn't amount to much. Denji didn't really learn much about Makima. Makima, per usual, kept him at arm's length, slowly manipulating him as she went along. Her date isn't about connection, it's about conditioning. She leads, he follows, and every interaction strengthens her ownership over him. Reze, on the other hand, treats her time with Denji like a breath of freedom she wasn't supposed to have. Her dates are messy, spontaneous, and full of emotion. Because they're not performing control, she's accidentally slipping into humanity, like a real date with someone who has chemistry with you. When she swims with him, teases him in the cafe, she's not guiding him with agenda-driven affection. She's reacting like a normal girl experiencing warmth for the first time. Their school date is especially revealing. Reze becomes playful, soft, and almost childlike. She opens up emotionally, laughs freely, leaning close to him, showing comfort and desire without calculating the effects. She gets flustered, hesitates, stares at him too long, things Makima Makima never does. The attitude is defined by conflict, not control. By the end of the movie, we can tell she's torn between her mission and the real connection she can't hide. Unlike Makima's perfectly curated emotional trap, Reze's moments feel unscripted, alive, and painfully honest. She treats Denji like someone she could choose, not someone she expects to kneel. And this is all the more telling by how both of them are in similar circumstances. Reze never got to experience school. In essence, while Makima's dates are acts of manipulation designed to tighten her grip on Denji's identity, Rize's dates are accidents of genuine affection that reveals the person she wishes she could be. Makima orchestrates moments to keep Denji dependent. Reze stumbles into moments that make her want to break free.
Say my name. My father gave me that name, and it meant nothing. Now I ask you to give it back to me. One last time. The way you said it at the beginning. When it meant the world to you.
The longer you live, the more you will realize that the only things that truly exist in this reality are merely pain, suffering, and futility.
Despite her often enigmatic and cruel actions, Makima's relationship with Chainsaw Man, specifically Denji, remains one of the most intriguing facets of her character. In light of recent developments in Chainsaw Man Part 2, Makima's motivations throughout Part 1 are re-examined, casting her in a surprisingly heroic light in comparison to her sisters. The looming appearance of the Death Devil within 6 months demands an unprecedented level of strength from both the Chainsaw Devil and the War Devil. To achieve this formidable power, they must instill fear into the hearts of the human populace. Unleashed upon the streets of Japan, a horde of mindless Chainsaw Devil hybrids wreak havoc, transforming the once semi-peaceful nation into a scene of utter pandemonium. The combination of casualties inflicted by Fami and Barin far surpass anything that we have seen Makima done in the past from a numbers perspective. And I guess you could make a moral argument. While Makima's actions have been ruthless and to an extent disregardful of innocent life just as her sister, it is worth considering that the individuals she targeted were either devil hunters or hybrids directly under her authority, as evident by their attire, or convicted criminals serving life sentences. Given Makima's peculiar affection for humanity, comparing that of humans to animals, she might perceive her actions as a form of mercy, sparing them from a prolonged and miserable existence behind bars. Makima's ultimate goal is world peace, even if her methods are extreme and involve the manipulation exploitation of Denji and his friends. Unlike her sister Famine, who seeks only death, Makima desires to eliminate the concept of famine and war altogether, which she believes are the root cause of human suffering. To achieve this, she recognizes the need to control the Chainsaw Devil, the most powerful devil in existence, hailed as the hero of hell, being able to devour devils and erase them from existence. Makima's approach is far less ruthless than that of her sisters, objectively speaking, as she isn't willing to sacrifice innocent lives so readily. However, both sides go for a sacrifice the few for the sake of the many concept. In Makima's case, that few is far less than what Famine has been doing. All in all, this echoes a utilitarian philosophy, that of one Kiritsugu Emiya, the main protagonist of Fate Zero, whom grapples with the weight of heroism and moral implications of sacrificing lives. Makima's actions, though unintentional, carry similar weight and raise questions about her motivations and her as a character. In layman's term, Makima was the lesser of two evils. It reminds me of the season finale of Loki's first season, in which Loki and Sylvie confront He Who Remains, the enigmatic creator of the Time Variance Authority, or the TVA for short. He reveals that his role is to maintain the sacred timeline, a carefully cultivated path through time that ensures the stability of the wider MCU multiverse. To preserve this delicate balance, He Who Remains prunes out troublesome timelines and recruits individuals from those timelines to work for the TVA, erasing their memories in the process. Evil
stuff. While this may seem like a drastic measure, and it is, He Who Remains explains that it is a necessary evil. Without his intervention, the sacred timeline would unravel, leading to the rise of far more dangerous variations of himself, known as Kang the Conqueror. These variants would wage a devastating war across the multiverse, destroying the peace and balance He Who Remains has fought so hard to establish. Just like He Who Remains, Makima's presence in the story was instrumental. She also achieved one of her key goals, the eradication of guns through the elimination of the Gun Devil. While Makima's absence has granted Denji relative peace and revitalization of devil hunting as a whole, by removing the overarching threat of the Control Devil being a superior, it has also paved the way for the emergence of her weaker yet still formidable sisters, Fami and Yoru, leading to the dire situation the characters face today. The threat of the Death Devil and the Chainsaw Man War. The characters' embodiments themselves position Makima as the lesser evil, juxtaposing control against war and famine, a deliberate choice, I believe. While Makima's methods raise ethical concerns, they resonate with the long-standing debate of individual freedom versus societal harmony. Take Mamoru Uchiha, for instance, and his plan to cast the infinite Tsukuyomi. On one hand, the populace would live happy lives, free of war, death, hunger, hatred. But on the other hand, they're robbed of their free will, being placed in an illusion. In contrast, war and famine, unlike Makima's quest for control, offer no valid justifications. War brings no benefits, only desolation and despair. Famine serves no purpose but to inflict suffering and death. They embody the principle of senseless suffering, devoid of any redeeming qualities. Makima's ideal world, ironically, is a controlled, sterile environment, a hypothetical Garden of Eden, a paradise on Earth, where humans never hunger, fight, or die, paradoxically elevating them to Makima's level, akin to almost immortal godhood. In essence, Makima isn't a hero. While her actions could be seen as misguided attempts to achieve a greater good, her presence in the story ultimately caused harm to the main characters, particularly Denji and those closest to him. This stems from her ulterior motive of forming a lasting bond with the Chainsaw Devil, a goal she could have achieved if she approached Denji as an individual rather than a tool. While she has shown some glimpses of understanding Denji's humanity during their shared movie watching marathon, it was not enough to prevent the tragic consequences of her actions. This could change with Nayuta's presence in Denji's life, potentially filling that void left by Makima herself. And if you want more of my thoughts on Makima and Nayuta, check out this video I did on the pair a while back. Tatsuki Fujimoto's ability to bring new context to older aspects of the story is truly remarkable. This ability was evident in part 1 and has continued to shine through in part 2, breathing new life into even the earliest of chapters. It's a testament to the incredible level of care and thought that Fujimoto has poured into Chainsaw Man, and it leaves me constantly engaged and surprised. I can't wait to see how many more pieces of the puzzle fall into place once part 2 is completed and readers are able to revisit the story from the beginning. I think Denji's character is moving in a direction of self-love. Denji needs to develop self-love and grow into the rock he so desperately needs. This is not to say Denji doesn't love himself, but he desires gratitude from others more than simply finding that gratification inward, and I think that's what Chainsaw Man Part 2 is going to tackle with Denji's character moving forward.
That was 2 years ago. August 19th, 2023, I uploaded a video deep diving into Denji, peeling back the layers of his character whilst debunking surface level criticisms thrown towards him and Fujimoto alike. Fast forward to December 2nd, 2025 and chapter 222, yet again vindicating me. It's almost like I can see the future, or Fujimoto's watching my mediocre videos. Denji's evolution speaks volumes, but to truly appreciate this development, we need to go back to the beginning. Before he ever becomes Chainsaw Man, Denji is a child forced to grow up too fast, inheriting his father's crushing Yakuza debt and a world that sees him as disposable. He isn't protected, nurtured, or loved. He's exploited. His body becomes currency, his pain becomes normal, and his expectations for life shrink until survival itself feels like a luxury. Denji doesn't learn what happiness is supposed to look like. He learns what bare minimum existence feels like. A slice of bread, a place to sleep, someone who doesn't beat him today. That's the foundation his emotional world is built on. down. And that matters, because everything that happens later preys on that emptiness. When Denji fuses with Puchita, it isn't a heroic transformation, it's an act of desperation. In theory, he gives up the little humanity he had just to keep living, and even after becoming Chainsaw Man, the world doesn't suddenly treat him better. He's still owned, still controlled, just now by the government instead of the Yakuza. And this is where the manipulation begins. Makima doesn't just control Denji with authority, she controls him emotionally. She offers him affection, validation, and attention in a way he's never experienced before. But it's conditional, transactional. Every smile comes with a leash. And Denji doesn't see the trap because he's never been taught what real care looks like. And not only from Makima, but Himeno takes advantage of Denji sexually. And she is quite older than Denji. He's constantly victimized by the women in his life. Despite all of that though, he has found family, but that family ends in loss. Every time Denji forms a genuine bond, it's ripped away violently, reinforcing the idea that attachment only leads to pain. The world punishes him for caring. The cruelest part is that Denji blames himself. Makima doesn't just take people from him, she reshapes his sense of self. She convinces him that his desires are shallow and his dreams are stupid, that his only worth is obedience. By the time the truth is revealed, Denji isn't just devastated, he's hollowed out. Now earlier I touched upon Himeno and Denji's sexual exploitation, and that's to say Denji is not sexualized throughout the story, he's exploited. And that distinction matters because what happens to him isn't about desire or attraction, it's about power. Denji is a teenage boy whose body is going through normal hormonal changes, but he has no guidance, no education, and no safe adult in his life to help him understand what those feelings mean. The adults around him recognize that vulnerability and take advantage of his hormones become leverage. These older figures, specifically Makima, use intimacy, touch, and sexual attention as a tool to control him.
I realized something just now. Every single time I meet a girl, she ends up trying to murder me! Everybody's after my chainsaw heart! What about my heart? Denji's heart! Does nobody want that? Huh?
Makima doesn't see Denji as someone discovering his identity. She doesn't see him at all. She sees someone easy to stare, easy to pressure, and easy to condition. Every interaction is shaped by imbalance, age, authority, experience, and control over his basic needs. This is grooming. Denji is slowly taught that affection comes with strings attached, that closeness must be earned through obedience, that if someone crosses his boundaries, it's not harm, it's generosity. Because Denji has never been shown what healthy care looks like, and the only two people to ever do so tries to kill him and dies when they get too close. There is no space for informed consent. Denji's housing, food, safety, and future are controlled by the one person initiating most of his sexual encounters. When saying no risks abandonment, punishment, or loss, choice becomes an illusion. Compliance becomes survival. But those things aren't in Denji's mind. He doesn't think about choice. He's just happy to be acknowledged by Makima. And this reshapes how he sees himself. He begins to believe that his worth is tied to how desirable he is to others. That confusion and discomfort are normal. Instead of being allowed to explore his feelings safely, he's rushed, pushed, shaped into accepting situations he doesn't understand. And it doesn't even stop with Makima. Fumiko also similarly exploits Denji and even Yoru. The tragedy isn't that Denji necessarily wants intimacy. The tragedy is that no one ever protects him when he's learning what it means. Denji's constant battle with manipulation and abuse causes him to change. We see it when Asa kisses him and he closes his mouth in fear of having vomit run down his throat or having his tongue bitten off. Even the way he views sex, which I spoke about in this video, to sum it up, sex is a sacred act, and so far it's the only act of intimacy that Denji has not had tarnished for him. But his relentless battle with abuse and manipulation has left scars that go far beyond the physical. These wounds are etched deep into his sense of self. Throughout Chainsaw Man, the cruel lesson he's learned again and again is that he's only loved, only valued when he's useful. To be more specific, Chainsaw Man is valued and useful, not Denji. The idea isn't just a passing thought, it's burned into his identity so fiercely that it shapes every choice he makes. By the time we reach Chainsaw Man Part 2, Denji's relationship with his own humanity becomes fraught and conflicted. The lines between Denji the boy and Chainsaw Man the weapon blur. For Denji, Chainsaw Man is not just a power or a role, it's a shield against a world that never saw him as more than a tool. Rejecting the Denji, the human, feels safer than risking vulnerability. This internal fracture becomes most evident in his interactions with Yoshida. When Yoshida gives Denji the ultimatum, stop being Chainsaw Man or else, he isn't threatening Denji's physical survival, he's challenging the very foundation of Denji's identity. Chainsaw Man isn't simply a form or a facade, it is the embodiment of Denji's survival instinct and his only perceived path of being worthy of attention and care. The trauma of conditional love has trained him to believe that his true self, the vulnerable, ordinary Denji, is unlovable. So he chooses the monstrous identity that demands respect, rather than risking the rejection that might come with simply being himself. We see this on two separate occasions: when he tries to out himself on public television to attract women, and when he brags about being Chainsaw Man to Asa. This struggle illustrates a powerful theme. Trauma can fragment identity, forcing someone to disassociate from their authentic self to survive. Denji's rejection of himself in favor of Chainsaw Man shows how trauma's shadows linger even in moments of apparent strength. It's a painful, complicated path towards healing, self-acceptance, and redefining what love and worth truly mean. Then there's Nayuta, Denji's last thither to innocence and hope. Her death is another devastating blow, shattering the fragile peace he's tried to build. Nayuta's loss deepens Denji's internal conflict, reminding him how quickly the people he loves can be taken away and how little control he truly has. At the same time, Denji's struggle with Asa, the first girl since Power, and arguably Reze, who sees Denji beyond the Chainsaw Man. Asa represents a chance to be seen not as just Chainsaw Man, but as Denji, the person beneath the monster. Yet this is complicated by Yoru's presence, whose own complicated feelings force Denji to confront the parts of himself he's tried to suppress. This tension between being seen as a weapon versus being recognized as a person defines Denji's ongoing battle. It's not just about survival anymore. It's about breaking free from the cycle of loss and pain and finding someone who can see past the Chainsaw Man mask to the real Denji inside. And this is what brings us to chapter 222, appropriately titled Denji Man. And this chapter can be summed up by one sentence:
I choose me.
Honestly, this entire chapter can be summed up in 4 minutes by listening to Kendrick Lamar's Mirror off his 2022 album Mr.Morale and the Big Steppers. And honestly, this was the spark that created this video. This is extremely ironic considering both Chainsaw Man Part 2 and Mr.Morale are both controversial works in their own right. But before we dive into Mr.Morale and Chainsaw Man, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please hit the subscribe button. It's the new year and I'd love to hit 50k by the end of the year. I make these kinds of videos on a wide array of pop culture topics, and all the support helps. If you'd like to take that support a step further, consider supporting the Patreon for only $1 a month so I can keep making these videos more frequently, or pick yourself up some sweet anime inspired merchandise from the channel's continuous sponsor, Boomslang. Let's get back to today's topic. Chainsaw Man's Part 2 release sparked a lot of debate and controversy within the manga community. Many readers felt that Denji's character hadn't changed much from Part 1, arguing that his growth was stagnant or superficial. Others criticized the story for feeling unfocused, unsure of what direction Fujimoto was taking the story in. The introduction of Asa, a major new character, was also met with mixed reactions. Some fans disliked her initially. The skepticism added to the feeling that the narrative was struggling to find its footing early on. These critiques mirror some of the challenges that Kendrick Lamar's Mr.Morale and the Big Steppers faced upon release. That album, much like Chainsaw Man Part 2, dives deep into trauma, identity, and personal struggle, subjects that can be uncomfortable and polarizing. Some listeners embraced its raw honesty, while others found its themes difficult or disjointed. At one point, it boiled down to, you can't listen to this in the club, so it was worthless. The connection between the two works lies in their willingness to explore messy, complex emotional landscapes without easy answers. That in itself can be controversial. With Kendrick, it was somewhat a departure from his last studio album, and for Chainsaw Man, it was a slow burn in addition to replacing the main character within its earlier sections. And again, the one song in Mr.Morale that I think captures Denji perfectly and serves as the catalyst for this video was Mirror. A mirror itself is a reflection of the person looking into it, and the song is Kendrick doing just that. It's a deep self-exploration where he sheds the mythos of Kendrick Lamar and communicates to the audience he is only human. He's not a savior, and he's tired of trying to live up to the ideas people have placed upon him. One lyric in particular not only perfectly describes Kendrick's journey from self-rejection to self-acceptance, but also Denji's.
I can't live in the matrix, rather fall short of your graces. This time I won't trade places.
This, in addition to this one panel in Chainsaw Man Part 1, defines Denji's self-image moving forward. So, I made a gamble. I bet that the whole time Miss Makima had only been looking at Chainsaw Man and not me. That she never saw me even once at the start. This burden had defined Denji for most of his life. The idea of swapping places becomes especially on the nose when Pochita takes over Denji's body as the Black Chainsaw Man. In that state, Denji doesn't just lose his sense of self, metaphorically, he loses it literally, becoming a near-mindless monster incapable of forming coherent sentences. By contrast, Denji Man represents the opposite outcome, a version of Denji who is fully in control of the complete Chainsaw Man transformation. This Denji has accepted who he is, reconciled the human and the devil within him, and no longer needs to become someone else or erase himself for validation. What is Chainsaw Man? An action-filled shonen with insane over-the-top battles and characters that consistently elevate its scope with each drama-filled moment, each earth-shattering battle. What is Chainsaw Man? A psychological horror that deconstructs its characters and pushes them to their utmost limits by tormenting them, by presenting the most impossible situations and questions that they're forced to deal with and answer. What is Chainsaw Man? A character drama filled with characters that are ever growing, ever changing with every chapter. Characters that perfectly reflect the real world, parading around in the skin of a battle shonen. What is Chainsaw Man? A pretentious modern manga with a middling story and a terrible main character that only ever fixates on sex and his own personal gratification with forgettable characters and boring fights. What is Chainsaw Man? A manga created by the talented Tatsuki Fujimoto, a man with a mind demented and so far removed from anything in the magazine his series is published in. What is Chainsaw Man? An acid trip of a battle manga, a horror manga with astonishing artwork, a character study filled with real people disguised as fictional characters, a popular manga by a passionate storyteller, a passionate artist, a boring manga that will never reach the heights of its contemporaries. What is Chainsaw Man? A masterpiece. I love Chainsaw Man. If it wasn't already apparent by the many videos analyzing the story, its characters and its themes, predicting what's next, giving my opinion on its anime adaptation, comparing it to other fictional stories, reading its author's every available work and deconstructing them as well. I know it's been a long time since my last Chainsaw Man video, and it may be another great lapse in time from this one to the next. I don't know what I plan to accomplish with this video. I barely have any sort of structure of what I want to talk about. I just want to talk about Chainsaw Man and everything surrounding it. Think of this as a love letter to a series that isn't even done yet. So maybe I'm too early on a video like this, but I don't really care. I want to talk about Chainsaw Man again. I want to talk about how it makes me feel, the controversy surrounding it, and just have a very raw and real discussion. Before we continue, if you're new here, subscribe. I'd like to hit 20k before the end of the year, and I can't make that possible without all of you. And if you do want to support this channel a step further, want to see more videos like this on a consistent basis, or somewhat consistent, feel free to subscribe to the Patreon so I can try to do this a little bit more often. This video will contain spoilers for Chainsaw Man, so with that in mind, let's get into today's topic. When I first read Chainsaw Man, I didn't know what to expect. Each chapter slowly building, setting up the world, the characters, and the twists. My first video in the series was me professing my love for a series I had freshly completed, and maybe I'll bring that series back in the future if you all want to see that. But since that very first video, I've decided to reread Chainsaw Man a couple times, watching how the series subtly foreshadows and sets up plots in the background for some of the best payoffs I've seen in Jump since Bleach. My second video in the series I dedicated to Aki Hayakawa, who at the time didn't have any character analysis made on him, and I felt like it was my job to talk and analyze this character like no one had before. One of Chainsaw Man's best characters that changes throughout the entire story, a character that truly captivated me on a deep level, reminding me of characters like Zuko and how well his arc was structured and integrated into the overall story of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Truly a tragic character in every sense of the word, marred by loss that puts up a wall to hide his vulnerabilities, and when he finally breaks down that wall, he's exploited. Then I decided it was time to take on my biggest undertaking with my video discussing the complicated relationship between Power and Denji, a relationship that's so tainted with misconception and controversy, all because of one word by one character. I'll never understand why this is so controversial. Chainsaw Man consistently asks its readers to question established ideas on so many topics, and love and relationships are no different. Chainsaw Man brings something new to its audiences, something that isn't handled with the same nuance in other series. Most battle shonen romance feels tacked on and underbaked, and the shonen that do focus primarily on romance are very on the nose with its depiction of relationship dynamics and love. But Chainsaw Man is real, almost uncomfortably, and it stems from Fujimoto's deep history of writing romance and relationship-driven stories of all different flavors. When I spoke about Nayuta and Makima and the irony of that relationship in comparison to Denji and Power and the many nuances that come within both, at the time Nayuta was barely a character, but with everything that happened within Chainsaw Man's second part, most of what I said still rings true. I've made videos breaking down, to me, Chainsaw Man's best arc and the best moment that had been built up as early as its first arc. The legendary confrontation with the Gun Devil, a moment that is sure to strike PTSD-esque fear into any Chainsaw Man fan. Only followed up by the next big arc in the series where Denji is forced to confront Makima after having everything taken from him. I could sit here and go through the long history of Chainsaw Man videos on this channel, but to keep a long story short, I've studied Chainsaw Man front and back, using Tatsuki Fujimoto's other works as a baseline mixed in with my own life experiences. This doesn't make my opinion more substantial than anyone else's though, but it shows that I have a deep love and passion for the story that has not changed and will most likely never change. I've talked about the characters, the themes, the manga, the anime, and once Chainsaw Man fully wraps up, I can't wait to look back at the series in its entirety and potentially discover more hidden seeds that connect directly back to its definitive finale. And I will be seeing the Chainsaw Man movie and reading whatever Fujimoto cooks up next. You best believe. Chainsaw Man has been the one constant in my life for the past few years. It's the only manga I actively keep up with bi-weekly. It's a series that, again, I've covered extensively, and if I'm being honest, it has generated the most financial profit on my channel. Not saying that money is the reason why I make those videos, but just to paint a picture of how Chainsaw Man has changed parts of my life. I hate a portion of this fan base. The people who misconstrued Fujimoto's writing and aren't willing to listen to anything else, the people who consistently complain about part 2 and accusing it of falling off, comparing it to the first half and unfinished section of a story to a finished one. I was there through it all. The complaints about Asa, yearning for Denji's grand reintroduction to the story just to be criticized when Denji does return, and accusing him of not growing or progressing at all, while Fujimoto slowly peppers in Denji's changes throughout the series, showing his growth as a character, his selfishness, his human attributes, his flaws, through exposition and visual storytelling. I love the slow build-up of part 2, each chapter setting up things at the back end as it takes an opposite approach to Chainsaw Man's initial breakneck pace storytelling, and I think it's purposeful. Makima has been eliminated from the story, and with her gone, Denji is not forced into life-altering drama early on, or consistently. He gets to enjoy peace, which is something foreign to him and us, as control is slowly lost as the world breaks down around its characters. The absence of Makima and the pure terror of Chainsaw Man needed to take its time to sink into the world as the four horsemen one by one made their appearances, the calm before the inevitable storm. What is Chainsaw Man? If you were to ask me that question, I'd respond with an amazing work of art that has touched me on so many levels by an author that has made me express so many emotions in the few years I've become acquainted with his body of work. A story that transcends most things that I've read and able to stand next to juggernauts like Attack on Titan, Bleach, or One Piece. A series that treats all its characters like real people with real emotions and real flaws, trying to navigate a world that's anything but ordinary. A story story of tragedy, family, love, death. A story that asks its readers to read between the lines a lot of the time and to just listen to the song Others. It's a story about hardship, loss, and the strength to keep going after each loss, keep starting over after each reset. Now, I pass that question on to you. What is Chainsaw Man?